So, what does the water sector look like in 2024? What are the dynamics and how do they help or hinder what we're trying to do? Firstly, as I mentioned, this is an enormous foundational market, adding at least $70 billion in spend annually. There are huge targets to aim at across the board in both CapEx and OpEx spend, and considerable diversity in sectors accounting for that spend. It's worth also thinking about the spend that is not yet captured here. We are continually on the lookout for companies that change the size of their markets by virtue of their existence, the Uber effect. So they pull in spend that would be impractical or uneconomic in the absence of their solution. There is a mountain of spend still to manifest as solutions improve. Now, this may sound odd, but we're big believers in pain. Now, we think that humans are essentially inertia monsters. We really don't like doing things differently unless there is an incentive structure in place that makes it radically likely that we will or will have to change. Climate change manifests primarily through water in providing that incentive structure, from whipsawing floods and scarcity in the US. In the last 8 months, stuff moves so fast now, but we remember we went from fights over the Colorado River to 12 feet of snow in 3 days on the Donner Pass. The floods in Pakistan that caused more than $10 billion in damages. My wonderful wife, Ruki, works for the International Rescue Committee, and they are spending an increasing amount of time on climate issues. To Lake Titicaca in Peru, receding 2 kilometers in the El Nino event last year. Climate change is water change. And the demand for technology to allow utilities, cities, companies, families to adapt to a changing water reality can only go one way. Quantifying this, if you extrapolate total insurance losses, so this doesn't capture losses and impacts outside of the insurable universe, we are looking at average losses of $200 billion per year to a total of $1.8 trillion by 2034, with 69% of that damage being water-related across drought, flood, storm. There is an enormous opportunity to maximize our resilience to these damages in the coming decades. And as you look at water stress in the US, WRI data shows us that water stress will become the norm by the end of the decade. Notice the emergent stress in the centers of population and economic activity in California, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, in Texas. We are already seeing clear signs of this, from the limitation of new building in Phoenix to the moratorium of contaminated water disposal in key parts of the Permian Basin in Texas. Increasing demand is meeting increasingly limited supply, which is resulting in a 40% shortfall between projected water demand and water availability as calculated by McKinsey. It is a big mountain to climb, but the mountain is the opportunity. And there is still so much for emerging entrepreneurs to go after, from legacy control systems to the sensing, isolation, and destruction of emerging contaminants, to risk management, to physical infrastructure renewal and installation. Governments and the private sector are responding, though there is an awfully long way to go to having anything like the resources dedicated that are commensurate with the size of the problem. The US has on the order of $111 billion, with, we believe, more to come, even though water was more or less overlooked in the IRA. On the corporate side, Microsoft, Meta, AWS, Coca-Cola, and many others have made significant water-positive commitments through basin replenishment and resilience work. One of the primary determinants of Taiwan Semiconductor's fab siting decisions in the US is access to adequate water supplies. AI is rather thirsty throughout the value chain, it turns out, in addition to it using almost 2 gallons per kilowatt hour of energy in the run-of-the-mill operations of the average data centers. Data centers, AI, and crypto used 460 terawatt hours in 2022, to give you a sense of the size of the thirstiness. The size of the AI prize, just as a single example, is so large that the major infrastructure companies have to get it right. On the other side, major corporate impacts continue to occur, from 3M's $10.3 billion PFAS settlement to BHP's $31.5 billion claim from the Brazilian government in January of this year over the Fundão dam collapse. The reference pricing of water management, and it's a really key point, this idea of the reference pricing versus the underlying price of water. The reference pricing of water management and water availability is evolving fast, because getting it wrong is increasingly likely to be a regulatory, financial, and PR disaster. So all of these effects are interacting and will interact over the coming years and beyond to generate a very significant increase in resources targeted to water security, availability, and resilience. A recent report from Global Water Intelligence cites a 3.3x increase in capital deployment in water security from public and private investment activities to corporate water spending, taking us from 3.8 trillion employed today to 12.6 trillion in 2034. And the good news for us is that this isn't prognostication. This isn't something we're waiting for and hoping will happen. It's a continuation of an obvious trend that has already started and will continue for a long time to come. Almost every chart that you see that covers the time period of the pandemic has the same reliable plunge starting in March 2020. For US capital spending in water and sewer, it barely retreated before starting steeply upwards. And we have only just seen the start of the impact of the 111 billion in aggregate federal financing that has been committed in the last 24 months. Combined capital spending has moved from 36 billion in 2020 to 68 billion in 3.5 years. And each of these projects is an opportunity for the use and deployment of new technology. Now, we're not the only people who have noticed this, and the chessboard is being set accordingly. There were some rather interesting moves in private equity in 2023, including Sun Capital's purchase of Coke Separation Solutions, and Ember Infrastructure taking H2O Innovation, who are friends of ours, hi Guillaume, private for $395 million. There is also increasing competition amongst the scaled players, with the EQT-backed Saw Neyhouse continuing their acquisitive streak, Grundfos taking on Metasphere to getting into stormwater, and Siemens getting into the digital twin business with their acquisition of Bunt Planet, which was not a cake company, I found out. What this image shows us is that there is a very interesting emerging playing field for potential acquirers of BIV companies. And the playing field is also increasingly interesting in terms of co-investors and downstream investors. So all of these firms are in at least one water company, including being co-investors with BIV, and all of them are actively looking for further opportunities. And it's really heartening to see water's profile lifting, though the deluge is by no means here yet. What do I mean by that? So to put this in context, I want to segue quickly into the overall climate investment world. So even though it hit a significant slowdown, though not as significant as elsewhere in VC in 2023, total cumulative investment hit 141.9 billion, up from 3.1 billion in Q1 2020. So what I want you to notice are the categories. Water is not included. But not only is it not included, it's a bit hard to know where to fit it. So built environment, maybe water's carbon footprint is significant. It accounts for around 10% of global emissions. We think that's actually a relatively significant undercounting. So potentially climate management, food, I mean, you'd hope so. Nevertheless, not showing up as a discrete category. And the picture doesn't get much clearer when you zoom in. Maybe you can pick out waste and recycling in industry. The point we want to make is that according to the WWF's excellent The High Cost of Cheap Water report, I do suggest you search that out. The annual economic value of water and freshwater ecosystems is estimated to be $58 trillion, equivalent to 60% of global GDP. And it's currently an afterthought in private and public markets investments. So even if we progress remotely towards wherever you would put the mean, we think the outlook is very strong indeed for the short, medium, and long term. And smart people continue to understand that in ever-increasing numbers. Our pipeline, as stewarded by Jenny, she really has done an excellent job, is stronger than ever and continuing to improve. And our first investment decisions in Fund 2 have been very competitive indeed. So these founders are also graduating into a more favorable downstream market for water investment than we have ever seen, with major rounds recorded for water companies in the last 24 months, including last year for Gradient, the sector's first unicorn. Our leading Fund 1 companies are raising the capital they need, most recently Sewer AI, who received 7 term sheets for their Series B, which in the current market is not very common. A really strong effort from Matt and the team. So overall, and I hope you're getting used to this, our famous father-in-law slide, as Sham helped me draw it out at our kitchen table in 2020, none of what we thought was going to be true then is getting any less true now. The supply and demand equation around solutions that solve real problems and create real value in water is strengthening in both directions. And as a result, the demand for our capital is accelerating and our decisions are getting tougher. And in that context, this slightly non-traditional 2x2, you should be in the top right, Tom, is slowly coming into reality. We are by some distance the most active deployer of any kind of scale at the seed stage. And while activity is not necessarily a precursor of quality, of course, we are very happy with our emergent reputation amongst founders as being an organization it's a good idea to partner with as a young company. There is still much work to do, but I would say we're probably a mid-sized, verging on hefty chimpanzee at this stage. It helps that we have a very simple North Star, the fundamental job that we are doing, which is we're finding, funding, and supporting the best water entrepreneurs in the world. And if we do that job properly, there is no reason we can't build an enduring and positive force in the water sector.